Hi, my name is Brett Kravitz, and I'm here today with Shana Napoli. She majors in environmental studies and minors in evolutionary studies at the State University of New Paltz in New York. She studied and researched primatology and conservation while she lived in Madagascar for 4 months in the fall of 2012, and she has agreed to sit here with me today and answer a few questions about how climate change in what she has observed, how climate change has affected the people and the country of Madagascar. So, hello, Shayna. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for sitting here with me today.
Of
So, I'll
course.
ask you a few questions and just, answer of what you observed while you're there and through your studies and research of primatology and conservation, how you observed climate change affecting the country. So, just first off, basically, how did you see the Malagasy people affected by environmental changes caused by climate change? Or did you not see any major differences to the citizens of Madagascar?
Well, I wasn't there when there were any major storms or there was any major things happening that were a result of climate change, but a few months before I was there, there was a monsoon, and um, they say that climate change causes these erratic weather patterns, and because of the monsoon, many of the people that lived there had flooded rice fields, and um, a lot of the food that they grow to eat was destroyed because of it. Which they're most of the people there live in a very rural setting, and if their food is destroyed, then their livelihood is pretty much destroyed. And as we know, with climate change, the weather keeps getting worse and worse and more unpredictable, and they don't have the technology to adapt to it like we do really here in America.
Right. So, did you see any preventative measures? Maybe did you see anything the government has been doing to try to help combat all these severe weather pattern changes? Any flood walls, policies, anything you saw that the government may have been trying to help the country?
Unfortunately, their government has been in shambles the past few years, and they very recently just had a Democratic presidential election. So hopefully, with that, there will be more regulation over things. But I didn't see any really preventative things on a government level. But there were a lot of, you know, um, nonprofits and other organizations that were there that were not only educating people on it, but um, teaching them other ways of farming that might be easier with, more erratic weather patterns and just supplying people that had their crops ruined with more food. So I wouldn't say I witnessed the government really doing anything, but hopefully as their government is built back up, they can address all of the problems.
Right. So the people seems like kind of have to fend for themselves right now.
Right, and as I said before, most of the country they live in the rural areas and they're not really educated much on the issues. So they have these crazy storms happen and they lose all their food, and I don't really think all of them know why, and they just kind of think they have to deal with it or not survive.
Right. So do you think or do you know of any possible solutions that might be put in place to help prevent the destruction of their farms and fields, or do you think there's anything that really could be done to help these people?
I mean, I don't. I think that on a global scale, things can be done, but as a very underdeveloped country, I don't really think they're adding much to the problem of climate change. Most people live on farms, and the people that live in cities are still pretty underdeveloped. So they're not directly adding to the problem of climate change. So I wouldn't say there's anything that can be done in terms of changing their behavior. um, I think that it more has to be done in countries like America and China and the places that are really, causing all of the destruction. And unfortunately, it's places like Madagascar and other third world underdeveloped countries, they want to develop, but all of these climate change issues aren't really going to allow them to, because the rest of the world is so aware of all the problems with excessive carbon emissions, and we don't want any more countries adding to it. So we really need to cut down in our developed worlds and our educated worlds so we can allow them to continue industrializing it to some extent so they can, make money and be happy like
Right.
we are.
So do you perceive Madagascar as victims to this world pollution and climate change, and how do the Malagasy people perceive themselves? I know you said they're more uneducated about the issues. But do they perceive themselves as victims? Are they even aware?
I mean, they're definitely victims. Like I said, they're not the ones adding to the problem. And I think that the where they're located, since it's an island, they're so isolated that it's not like in Western Africa where you have these countries going on the internet and learning about what America is like and learning about all these things. They're so isolated in Madagascar that they don't really know. So I wouldn't say they view themselves as victims. The ones that are aware, I'm sure, do. People living in the capital city on Tananarivu who are more educated. There is a college there. It's slightly more developed. I didn't talk to anyone that viewed themselves as a victim, but I'm
Mhm.
sure they would because, like I said, their development is being slowed down because of all of this.
Right. Right. Okay. So you mentioned a few times you talked about the world having an effect. However, the problems that are occurring in Madagascar due to these changes, do you see that as a pretty isolated issue of their problems, their field destruction? Is that isolated to just Madagascar, or do you see their issues having an effect on, surrounding countries or the world? Were you able to perceive, how, their destruction of their country affects other people?
I mean, I'm not so sure that it does because, like I said, they're very isolated. They're an
Hmm.
island and they don't have many exports. So,
Okay.
if they were a country that we received a lot of their um, resources, then maybe we'd be more affected by them. But I think the only thing they really produce there that we want is vanilla, and that's already a resource that's a commodity, and it's already somewhat expensive. So I don't know, and especially them being a country so close to the equator, those are the places that are feeling all the damage and
Right.
consequences of climate change. But I don't know, I don't think many people even think about Madagascar
Hmm.
because technically it's part of the African continent, but it's so secluded and people don't really travel there that much. And I think that if more people, and especially America, found out about how amazing the country was, then there could be more tourism and there could be more money, and that could help them out with all the issues. But as of now, most of their tourists are from Europe, and there aren't that many of them.
Right. So real quick, just the last thing. I know you studied a lot about animals there. How did you see the wildlife and nature affected? And does the wildlife and nature have an effect on socially on the people of that country as well?
Well, the wildlife and everything is definitely really affected by climate change because there's a ton of lemurs in Madagascar, obviously, and they're already very, very endangered. Many species have gone extinct and they can't adapt to the climate changing. Madagascar is also considered one of the biodiversity hotspots of the world because there are so many endemic species of flora and fauna living there. I know that all of the marine life is really suffering from it because the ocean currents are changing. So turtle and fish migration is getting messed up because of it. But that also affects the people because the people extract things from the forest, even in a non-destructive way, like bananas or things like that that they eat. And
Hmm.
if this continues, those food resources or even medical resources, if they because I know they use a lot of herbal medicine that they get from the forest, that might be in jeopardy if the climate continues to change like this. And with changes in rainfall patterns is also very bad for the rainforest because it's such an old place and is so adapted to how the rain has been currently happening and how much rainfall they get so far that I don't really think that the forest can survive if the rainfall patterns change so much.
Right. It's unfortunate. I hope that someone or the people of Madagascar are able to come out of this climate change effects and come out productive in the end. So thank you for sitting here with me today, Shayna.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
your
you.
knowledge, and I hope you're able to impart some wisdom on more people, and people can learn about the problems of Madagascar from climate change.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's a really beautiful country, and like the lemurs are beautiful, and the people are just so nice, and they all deserve to live symbiotically there without the effects of our greediness.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for sitting here, Shayna.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
In the interview, Shana focused a lot on the underdevelopment of Madagascar and how the people don't have the education to adapt to the climate change. What Shana had to say compares a lot with Nicholas Schmidl's article, Wanted, A New Home for My Country, and how the Maldives are a victim of climate change since it is an isolated area that has a small amount of carbon dioxide emissions and isn't able to help itself from the climate change, and how the problem is needed to be fixed on a global scale to make a difference. Unlike the article, Shana made the point that since climate change is known to be bad, no one really wants another country emitting carbon dioxide, so it's another reason that Madagascar is unable to become a developed country, adding to the ways that they are a victim of climate change. She also pointed out that there are a few simple fixes to helping the farmers in Madagascar, such as changing the way they are farming to work better with the monsoons that have been flooding their fields, but due to the underdevelopment of Madagascar, it isn't really an option to be able to educate the farmers and people in rural areas. Another point that Shana made is that since Madagascar is so isolated, no one really knows how beautiful the country is and they don't get much tourism. But if they were to, it would help out their economy greatly, enabling them to learn better farming techniques, thus improving their way of life. Shana included that Madagascar isn't contributing to the climate change since she was focusing more on the industrial aspect of carbon dioxide emissions, but she did not include that due to the deforestation that is happening in Madagascar, they are not only decreasing the amount of biodiversity and, like she said, the extinction of some species of lemurs that was happening due to climate change, but they are also contributing to the climate change since the deforested areas aren't able to absorb as much carbon dioxide, which indirectly contributes to the climate change. Madagascar needs help with the new democratic government to make changes to either stop climate change and the bad weather that comes with it, or to be able to adjust to it. Climate justice isn't on Madagascar's side, and the climate change needs to be handled on a much larger scale to make a difference.